Hey guys, Stephen Cox here, and today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the fretless based ukulele compared to the fretted. If you like videos like these, please hit subscribe below and consider becoming a patron. So first, let's talk about the pros of the fretless. So one of the biggest complaints that I hear from a lot of people on bass ukuleles is that the intonation can be out. So sometimes you'll play a note and you'll check it with the tuner, and even though the string's in tune, that note will be out of tune. Well, with a fretless instrument, you can always just adjust your hand slightly. If you know that the note is slightly flat all the time, you can just move up from where you think the note's supposed to be, or if you have fret markers, if the lines are there and they're slightly off, you just learn the instrument and you can play slightly above or slightly below to counterbalance that. So that's a huge plus. So another one is the slides. So obviously, when you don't have frets, the slides are going to be smoother. So one slight disadvantage of this is that they get quieter faster. The frets kind of give it a boost in volume as you're going up, but the slides are much smoother and they sound much better. And once again, when you're sliding on these instruments, sometimes it pulls the string, so it'll make the note you end on a little bit flat. Well, here, if you're using your ear, you can just keep sliding until that note's in tune. So that's another advantage of the fretless. So a third advantage is the vibratos. If you're doing a vibrato and you just move your hand from side to side, let me see if you can hear that a little bit. This is acoustic. But if you move your hand side to side, you get that little wobble, wah, 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 wah kind of thing. And while you can do that on the fretted instruments as well, it's just more effective on the fretless, so you get a better vibrato. So another advantage is that since there are no frets, you can't accidentally misfret a note causing fret buzz. The note might be out of tune, but you won't hear that from playing the note too lightly or having your fingers too far back because there's no fret for it to buzz against. And then one last pro of the fretless is that when you play, it's going to sound a little bit more like an upright bass even than the fretted with the rubber strings. And the reason for this is when you're playing an upright bass, it doesn't have frets, so you're getting the sound of your finger holding the string against the wood. So you're not getting the sound of a piece of metal that is being held up against. So it's a slightly different tone that'll give you a slightly more upright sound. So now let's talk about the cons. So the biggest con of fretless is that the notes aren't automatically in tune where you play them. If you're slightly off with your finger, the note's going to be out of tune. So for this reason, you have to develop your ear really well. So it's really good it's a good practice, but if you're not looking to spend this much time perfecting how well you can hear notes in tune, then it may just be a tricky aspect of it that you don't want to deal with. So some fretless bass ukuleles will have lines, and that would be where the frets were, so you know exactly where to put your finger for the notes, and if the intonation's good on the instrument, it'll be in tune, but a lot of them do not. So if you look at this one, it does not have the markers there, but it does have dots. Do you see these little dots? There they are. So if you see these little dots, they tell you kind of where to go, but there's not a dot for every fret, so you're kind of using the relative distance between things by looking at it, and then of course using your ear to micro adjust to get the notes in tune. So that's a little bit of a hassle if you don't have the fret markers. Also, even if you have the fret markers, it might take some getting used to that you play right on that mark. Because with the frets, when you're holding the string down, you play in between two frets to hold it against the piece of metal. But here we want to hold it right over that mark, and you've got to see which part of your finger is actually holding it. So you don't want a little bit of finger hanging in front of it, causing the note to be sharp. You got to know exactly which part of your finger is pushing against the fingerboard, so that you get the note in tune. So there's a limitation with the fretless bass ukuleles on strings. So basically, because this fingerboard is made of a wood that's not super duper hard, you do not want to use round wound strings on this. So flat wound strings are okay as long as you have a truss rod. This instrument does not. I would not recommend putting flat wound strings or round wound strings on one without a truss rod. But if it has a truss rod, flat wound strings are okay because they're smooth. They're not going to dig into the fingerboard or fretboard. But round wounds have those ridges, and those little ridges on the string will bite into the neck and leave little dents in the neck. So that can sometimes cause your intonation to be out. It can sometimes cause some weird buzzes on the instrument. So you may want to not put round wounds on there. So that limits your string options, whereas you don't have the limited string options on the fretted instruments. Speaking of less options, the other thing about fretless U-basses is that they're not as common. So if you're looking for a inexpensive fretless, it's harder to find. This one was fairly inexpensive, but I think it suffers because the brand isn't a well-known brand. So once again, it doesn't have a truss rod, whereas most bass ukuleles do. And you have to really look around and see your options. But for instance, Kala on their lower priced models don't have a fretless option. And this may change in the future, but for now there's just not as many options for fretlesses. Alright guys, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the fretless bass ukulele and how it compares to the fretted bass ukulele. If you like videos like these, once again, please like the video below, subscribe, and consider becoming a patron. I will see you on Thursday for the live stream and next Tuesday for a new video.